Hello there. In the heart of Chongqing, behind its seemingly peaceful and glamorous facade, silent crimes were taking place, destroying the lives of countless individuals. In 2011, a major case was exposed, shocking the entire public. A ruthless madam trampled on human rights to fulfill her dream of wealth and power. Even to this day, the victims of this cruel woman cannot forget the years of living in hell. She became known as the most powerful and notorious female crime boss in Chongqing, China. Wang Ziki was born into an ordinary family in Chongqing with 5 siblings. She was the third child in the family. Due to the large number of children, their household struggled financially. One would expect that growing up in poverty would make children more understanding and willing to help their parents. But Wang's eldest brother was the opposite. He had no ambition and spent his days associating with gangsters. Eventually, he got involved in a violent fight that resulted in someone's death, and he was sentenced to death. Influenced by her brother's bad example, Wang was also far from a model student at school. With her striking appearance, she caught the attention of many young men around her. Thanks to her beauty and outgoing personality, she became the target of pursuit for many delinquents. Because of this, Wang saw beauty as a source of power. Later, she lost interest in studying, and in 1990, before even graduating high school, she and her younger sister, Wang Yuaning, opened a beauty salon on a busy street. Given their looks, the two sisters could have easily become the star faces of their beauty salon, making the business thrive. However, for some reason, ever since they opened, their salon remained deserted. Watching other beauty salons flourish with a steady flow of customers, the sisters couldn't help but wonder why there was such a big difference. Eventually, Wang secretly investigated and discovered that other salons didn't make money from selling beauty products but from special services. Taking advice from industry insiders, Wang quickly realized what was missing. After discussing with her sister, they decided to introduce these services into their own salon. She believed that this strategy would turn their business around. However, to their surprise, not only did they fail to make money, but they also suffered significant losses. After months of struggle, they had no choice but to accept the harsh reality. They could not sustain the business. Yet, in their hearts, they were filled with resentment. They had invested time, money, and effort, yet their earnings were no better than working for someone else. Despite their unwillingness to give up, reality was undeniable. Finally, the sisters decided to close the salon, find another job to make a living, and search for a different path to wealth. Just as they were discussing closing the shop, a mysterious couple appeared, an encounter that would change their fate forever, dragging Wang Ziki into an inescapable abyss. The woman, named Zhong Guangyu, was known in the underworld as Sister Zhong. She had been in the prostitution business for years and was highly experienced, well-versed in every trick of the trade. The man, named Tao Minggu, was known as a social butterfly, but in reality, he was nothing more than a man who lived off women. However, being surrounded by women all the time gave him an excellent understanding of their psychology, making him highly skilled in managing them. When the couple proposed a partnership with Wang, she didn't hesitate and agreed immediately. After all, her beauty salon wasn't making money, and the worst that could happen was still having to close it. She figured she might as well take a gamble and see what happened. And so, the four of them embarked on a path of illegal profit-making. What Wang didn't expect was that as soon as these two people joined, her salon suddenly became incredibly successful, attracting a flood of customers. With this, Wang and her sister made their first real fortune. Having tasted success, the two sisters began thinking even bigger. They wanted to expand on a larger scale and make even more money. The temptation of immense profits led the Wang sisters deeper into the criminal world. By the end of 1998, Wang had opened a tea house in the suburbs. At the time, tea houses were extremely popular, drawing in large crowds. Her tea house opened at 2 p.m., yet even by the early hours of the next morning, the lights remained on, and customers came and went endlessly. The waiting line downstairs stretched to hundreds of people, longer than the queue at a specialist doctor's office. To keep customers entertained while waiting, Wang even set up entertainment facilities such as poker rooms and billiards tables on the lower floors, turning the tea house into a well-known entertainment hotspot. Madam of Chongqing. After the success of her tea house, Wang continued to expand, gradually opening 8 more sex service establishments across the city. Once she had mastered the industry's core operations, her business flourished even further. Wang knew that to run a successful enterprise, she needed a stable customer base. To keep customers returning, there had to be something that captured their interest. And in this industry, what customers truly sought was novelty. But how could she create those new experiences? After much discussion, she and her sister devised a plan that could only be described as ruthless. They would recruit workers from job markets. The idea was in place, but executing it was not easy. Those seeking jobs were ordinary, decent people, and no one would willingly take on such work. Wang understood this, so she and her sister resorted to deception. They advertised high salaries and stable jobs to lure young, attractive women. Many of these women were still very young, inexperienced in life, and thrilled to have found what seemed like a good job, completely unaware that they were walking into a predator's den. Once inside, leaving was nearly impossible. Wang would find various excuses to confiscate their identification cards and phones, cutting off all their contact with the outside world. Without their documents, the women were rendered powerless, left with no choice but to be manipulated. Some of them tried to resist. This was where Tao Minggu's role became crucial. For first-time offenders, he would usually offer them a chance. He would lock them in a pitch-black room and deprive them of food for several days. However, for repeat offenders or those who refused to comply, he showed no mercy. At best, they were brutally beaten. At worst, their survival became uncertain. One of the most terrifying methods he used was the infamous iron bed, a name that sent chills down the spines of anyone who had heard of it. Anyone who refused to work or attempted to escape would be tied to this bed and subjected to beatings, even sexual assault. With these cruel tactics, Wang gained complete control over the women. As the business grew, Wang continued expanding, opening 9 more sex service establishments in the Yuzhong district of Chongqing. However, as her empire grew and the money flooded in, she also became a target of jealousy and resentment. This pushed Wang to seek protection for herself. She didn't just hire assassins to eliminate those who interfered with her business. She also built relationships with other crime bosses. Knowing that her work could never be public, she needed powerful figures to shield her operations. Besides offering hefty bribes, Wang secured protection by supplying beautiful women to high-ranking officers in the Chongqing Public Security Bureau, such as Deputy Director of Criminal Investigation Huang Daqiang and Deputy Director of Public Order Chen Dao. With these connections, Wang found the backing she needed. Under their protection, her tea house business thrived even more. Wang Ziqi's success was largely due to her workforce. According to unofficial reports, up to 2,000 women were held captive in her establishments, with millions of customers passing through. The numbers were staggering. At this point, she had officially become the most powerful female crime boss in Chongqing, untouchable by any force. The nightmare of these women. Beyond physical threats, Wang and her accomplices treated these women with unimaginable cruelty. They operated under a fascist-like system of control. The women were confined in tiny, overcrowded rooms, with no proper beds or furniture, only a few bunk beds. At peak times, some women had no place to sleep and were forced to lie on the floor, barely surviving each day. During the day, they were locked in their rooms. At night, they were gathered and transported for work. Even during menstruation or after undergoing forced abortions, they were not allowed to rest. Their lives were utterly miserable. After each service, they were required to attend evaluation meetings. Every week, there was a major meeting. Any woman who broke the rules or received complaint from customers was punished on the spot. One woman, known only as Chu, had been beaten and tied up in the tea house for so long that she developed an extreme trauma response. Every time she tried to sleep, she had to tie her own hands and feet to feel at ease. Under prolonged, inhumane torture, her mental state completely collapsed. She eventually lost all sense of self-preservation and would automatically strip whenever she saw a man. This was just one example of the monstrous brutality Wang inflicted upon these women. There was another girl named Jun. When she realized she had been deceived, she pleaded to leave. However, this request immediately enraged Wang. Under immense pressure from her, Jun had no choice but to quietly accept her fate just like the other girls. But the thought of escaping never left her mind. After 6 months, she finally found an opportunity. One night, she was locked alone inside a residential building. Overjoyed, she waited for the guard to leave before taking out a rope she had secretly prepared for a long time and attempted to climb down from the 8th floor. Unfortunately, the rope was too short, leaving her suspended in midair. Faced with no other choice, her survival instincts kicked in. She let go. When she woke up, she was told she would be paralyzed for life. But before she could even process the devastating reality of losing her ability to walk, Tao Minggu appeared. He threatened her, forcing her to say that she had simply fallen out of a window while cleaning, warning that if she told the truth, he would kill both her and her family. Terrified, Jean became their puppet, repeating the story they had fabricated. She thought that if she behaved well, they would eventually let her go. But she was wrong. Even in her paralyzed state, she was still not free. To cover up their crimes, Wang's gang illegally detained Jun for 6 years. She only regained her freedom when the police rescued her. During those 6 years, she was confined to a dark, windowless room, moving only by pulling herself along with a rope. The women were not only forced to live in unbearable conditions. Their food was often moldy or rotten. They were also subjected to mandatory training drills and escape rehearsals. Wang demanded that they be fully dressed within 25 seconds of hearing an alarm and follow a predetermined escape route. Some may wonder, if Wang and her gang were so confident that they were untouchable, why did they need escape drills? The truth was this was one of Wang's most cunning manipulations. These so-called escape drills were nothing more than a psychological tactic to brainwash the women. Sometimes, they were staged to seem incredibly real. Wang would have some of her men dress in police uniforms and pretend to arrest the missing girls, interrogating them. During these interrogations, if any of the women dared to confess the truth about their situation or try to ask for help, their punishment would be severe. At best, they were thrown into a dark room without food or water for days. At worst, they were subjected to brutal beatings. Because of these rehearsals, the women genuinely believed Wang had absolute power, even over the police, and that no one could help them. None of them realized that the entire scenario was an act, merely a way for Wang to test their obedience. Through these cruel psychological tricks, Wang maintained tight control over the women, proving just how ruthless she was. With these various tactics, Wang dominated Chongqing for 15 years, amassing a fortune worth hundreds of millions of yuan. The number of women she victimized could easily be in the thousands, while many others remain missing. Evil will be punished, but as the saying goes, those who do evil will pay the price. After 15 years of terror, the Chinese government intensified its crackdown on organized crime. With the downfall of Wang's protectors, she too was exposed. On the night of August 7th, 2009, Chongqing police launched a massive raid with over 200 officers targeting Wang's tea house. Her criminal empire was dismantled, and 38 women, along with managers of various ranks, were arrested. However, unfortunately, Wang Ziqi, Wang Yuanning, and Tao Minggu managed to escape. Although they were not immediately captured, it didn't take long for the authorities to track their movements. Wang Yuanning had fled abroad early on, while Wang and Tao Minggu went into hiding in Shenyang after their tea house was shut down. On September 9, 2009, police arrested Wang and her accomplices at a shopping mall in Shenyang. By August 2010, the court publicly announced the verdict in the first trial related to the case. Wang Ziqi was sentenced to death, and all her personal assets were confiscated. Tao Minggu was also sentenced to death and permanently stripped of his political rights. Meanwhile, Wang Yuanning had fled China, hiding in countries like Austria and the Philippines. Chongqing police immediately issued an international red notice through Interpol. Eventually, with assistance from Philippine authorities, Ning was captured while hiding inside a fast food restaurant. On April 1st, she was extradited back to Chongqing to stand trial. For years, the Wang sisters showed no regard for the law, committing heinous crimes and forcing over 2,000 women into illegal activities. Countless women and rivals were brutally killed at their hands. Their crimes were beyond forgiveness. But as the saying goes, the net of justice is vast and tight. Though it may seem loose, no one escapes. On December 7, 2011, Wang Ziki and her accomplices were executed. For 15 years, countless young women with dreams of a better future were tortured, exploited, and violated by Wang. Even after all these years, many survivors still cannot forget their days in that living hell. Some have never been able to rebuild their lives. Wang and her 3 accomplices not only trampled on these women's basic human rights, but also stripped them of their futures and hope. What are your thoughts on the infamous madam and crime boss, Wang Ziki?
This tragic case stemmed from blind love, leading to unforgivable actions committed by a domineering man who cared only about his own feelings. The incident occurred at Shek May Estate. This was the first public housing estate completed in Hong Kong and was put into use in 1954. Most of the residents in this area lived in dilapidated buildings. The living conditions in the area were extremely poor, and the population was overcrowded. However, this was not the main reason the government decided to build public housing at that time. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1953, a massive fire broke out at the wooden shantytown of Shek Kip, destroying the homes of more than 58,000 people in just one night. As a result, the government began constructing affordable housing. 50 years later, on January 10, 1994, a crime occurred in a public housing block at Shek Kip May. An enraged man entered the HSBC branch located on the ground floor of the estate. He went straight to counter number 8 and caused a commotion, leaving the female employee and customers in the bank in a state of panic. The branch manager immediately stepped in to assess the situation. At that point, the female employee wrote down a phone number on a blank piece of paper and handed it to the man, who then left the bank, restoring calm. However, not long after, he became angry again and returned to confront the female employee. Hearing their conversation, many inferred that he had come to the bank looking for his wife. The female employee helplessly responded that she only had the phone number of the man's wife, but didn't know where she was and could not help. The man grew more furious, insulted her, and then stormed out. Why did this man come to the bank to look for his wife? What was the relationship between the female employee and his wife? This man was Zhu Baoguang, 32 years old. At the time, he worked as an interior decorator. His wife, AI, was 31 years old. They had been married and had 3 children together. However, their marriage was far from happy. Zhu Baoguang often professed that he loved his wife deeply, but paradoxically, he was not good at managing his emotions and always wanted to control her every move. As a result, whenever AI didn't act according to his wishes, he would beat her. AI resolved to leave home because of this, but out of concern for her young children, she accepted Zhu Baoguang's sincere apologies and returned home. Over the years, their relationship grew increasingly fractured to the point of near collapse. 3 days before the crime, specifically on January 7, 1994, AI left home again because she could no longer endure the situation. When Zhu Baoguang calmed down, he resorted to his usual tactics to try to bring AI back. However, no matter how many times he called her, AI didn't answer. 1 day passed, then 2 days, and Zhu Baoguang was unable to contact his wife. He tried calling AI's family, but they said she hadn't returned to them and didn't know where she had gone. Zhu Baoguang realized that this time AI was determined to leave him. He suspected the only place she might have gone was the home of her close friend Lu Mai. Knowing that AI deeply loved her children, Zhu Baoguang used his son's phone number to send a message, and to his surprise, it worked. When AI received the message from her son, even though she suspected it might be one of Zhu Baoguang's tricks, as a mother, she couldn't help but worry. She called Lu Mai to ask if anything had happened. At this point, Zhu Baoguang became certain that AI had gone to Lu Mai's house. Lu Mai was the female employee working at counter number 8 of the HSBC bank branch in Ji Shiwu Min, Shek Mei. Little did she know that her kind actions would put her in danger. In reality, Lu Mai and AI had only known each other for a few months. Due to her job as an office worker at an interior design company, so AI often went to the bank to deposit checks. This was how she got to know Lu Mai. Moreover, since Lu Mai had recently bought a house in Chongqing and sought interior design services from AI's company, they began talking more frequently. When AI left home, she asked Lu Mai if she could stay with her for a few days. Without hesitation, Lu Mai agreed. When Zhu Baoguang learned that AI was staying with Lu Mai, he decided to write a letter to AI. He also recorded a message and gave it to Lu Mai to pass on to AI, hoping for a slim chance to salvage their marriage. The letter was filled with sincerity as he took full responsibility for his mistakes and expressed his desire for her to return home to their little family and start over. After writing the letter and recording his heartfelt message, Zhu Baoguang wanted to deliver the recording to Lu Mai immediately. However, he didn't know where she lived or her phone number. The only thing he knew was that Lu Mai worked at the HSBC bank branch in Jishiwumin. Unfortunately, it was the weekend and the bank was closed on Saturday and Sunday, so he had to wait until Monday. On Monday, the fourth day since AI left home, and the day the tragic incident occurred, Zhu Baoguang drove to Jishiwumin. Upon arrival, he realized he had forgotten the recording. Impatient by nature, he became furious and stormed into the bank, heading straight to Lu Mai's counter to demand answers. He insisted that she give him AI's phone number. Seeing his aggressive demeanor and to avoid disturbing other customers and colleagues, Lu Mai quickly handed him AI's phone number as mentioned earlier. This number was actually a connection line between AI and Lu Mai. To make a call, one had to enter the correct password. When Zhu Baoguang discovered this, he believed that Lu Mai was deliberately playing tricks on him to prevent his family from reuniting. Enraged, he returned to the bank a second time to confront her and demand to know her address. Confronted with his rudeness and temper, Lu Mai refused to disclose any information about AI. Frustrated, Zhu Baoguang left the bank for the second time, restoring peace to the establishment. At first, the bank staff thought the man would give up and not return. However, at 11:10 a.m. that same day, Zhu Baoguang came back to the HSBC branch for the third time. This time, he brought 2 cans of liquid and a bundle of newspapers. He stormed towards counter number 8, demanding to know why Lu Mai was hiding AI's whereabouts. Faced with his questions, Lu Mai, exhausted, chose to ignore him and politely asked him to leave. It's unclear whether it was Zhu Baoguang's excessive love for his wife or his frustration with Lu Mai's dismissive attitude, but he suddenly opened the 2 cans he had brought. One can was thrown directly at Lu Mai's counter, while the other was poured across the area in front of counter number 8. In an instant, the entire bank was filled with the strong smell of gasoline. Everyone began to realize that this deranged man was holding a newspaper and a matchstick. He yelled, demanding everyone leave the bank if they didn't want to die. Terrified people fled the bank in panic, except for one high school student who stood in front of a counter staring at him. The fire broke out in the customer area, where Zhu Baoguang ignited it. After the fire started, there were 2 escape options for the 13 employees inside. Either stay in the staff area or run through the flames to escape the burning scene. However, making this decision was not easy as gasoline spreads flames quickly. The blazing scene before them made it nearly impossible to stay calm. At the time, there was no automatic sprinkler system, and the 2 electronic gates and glass barriers used for security purposes could temporarily hold back the flames. As a result, the employees inside did not immediately attempt to escape the fire, but instead hid in the staff area, hoping that the electronic gates and glass barriers would hold until the firefighters arrived. However, the greatest threat they faced was not the flames themselves, but the carbon monoxide produced by the fire. Even a small amount of carbon monoxide could be fatal. The glass barriers could temporarily block the flames, but the thick smoke began seeping into the staff area through various gaps and was quickly drawn in through the air ventilation system from the burning area. The black smoke rapidly spread inside. At that point, Lu Mai and another colleague realized they could no longer stay there and decided to run outside. The staff area itself was not yet on fire, but the black smoke filled the area, making it pitch dark with extremely low visibility. It was nearly impossible to see anything directly in front of them. Struggling, Lu Mai and her colleague made their way to the main door. When they managed to open the first door, they found that the second door would not open. They decided to turn back, but the first door was no longer operable either. The reason was that the bank had a safety mechanism. When the power was cut, the electronic gates would cease to function. The bank's electrical system had been shut down due to the fire, leaving Lu Mai and her colleague trapped in a narrow space between the two doors. The black smoke thickened and the situation grew increasingly dire. Meanwhile, the other 11 employees had sought refuge in different areas. Some hid in the manager's office, some in sealed rooms, and others in the restroom. What would become of the 13 employees? Could they hold on until the firefighters arrived to rescue them? Meanwhile, after starting the fire, Zhu Beoguang quickly fled the scene. His clothes were already burning when he left. Upon seeing the police, he ran toward them and surrendered himself. 3 minutes after the firefighters arrived, they extinguished the flames and used fans to disperse the thick black smoke. Once the fire was put out, they entered the building and found that the staff area had not been burned. However, the firefighters knew that approximately 10 employees inside were in grave danger, as carbon monoxide poisoning was often the primary cause of death in such fires. Eventually, the firefighters located Lu Mai and her colleague trapped between the two doors. They safely guided them out of the building, which was nearly destroyed, and both received thorough medical care afterward. During the operation, the firefighters also successfully rescued the other employees trapped in various locations. Thanks to the swift and precise efforts of the firefighters, all 13 people trapped in the bank were rescued without any fatalities. Following the incident, authorities launched an investigation to determine the cause of the fire and to prosecute Zhu Beoguang, the arsonist, in accordance with the law. The bank also implemented additional safety measures to ensure future security. Interestingly, during interrogation, Zhu Beoguang claimed that as he fled in panic, he was mistakenly apprehended by the police, who suspected him of being the arsonist. He further claimed that his admission to starting the fire was due to fear and confusion in the aftermath of the blaze. Such a foolish excuse, however, did not fool the police. Nonetheless, successfully prosecuting Zhu Beoguang required both witnesses and physical evidence. The fire had severely damaged the bank's security camera system, and all surveillance footage was lost. The police were unable to recover the footage from the time of the incident. Fortunately, when Zhu Beoguang caused a commotion in the bank, there were many customers present. They had witnessed him carrying 2 cans of gasoline, newspapers, and a lighter, creating chaos in the bank. After the fire, police found 2 empty cans reeking of gasoline and some charred newspaper remnants. They also recovered Zhu Beoguang's fingerprints. The police then carried Zhu Beoguang's photo to nearby convenience stores and hardware shops to investigate whether anyone had seen him purchasing supplies. One store employee confirmed that this man had bought 2 cans of gasoline prior to the incident. Both the convenience store employee and the store's surveillance footage confirmed that Zhu Beoguang had purchased a newspaper and a lighter bearing the store's logo on the morning of the crime. The lighter with the store's logo was retrieved from Zhu Beoguang's pants pocket when he was arrested, making denial nearly impossible. On the very day of the incident, Zhu Beoguang was charged with arson. Notably, an apology recording that Zhu Beoguang had sent to AI was also found at his home. It later became key evidence in court. With all this evidence, Zhu Beoguang was convicted of intentional arson. However, the court would determine his specific punishment based on factors such as the nature and severity of the crime, his criminal history, and other considerations. Zhu Beoguang could face imprisonment or fines, depending on the court's decision. 15 days later, on January 26th, 20-year-old employee Xia Ming'an passed away. Finally, on January 31st, 10 other victims, including Lu Mai, also succumbed to their injuries. In total, 12 lives were lost in this fire, leaving only one survivor. She was the only person still breathing unaided when rescued. Mi and I, a 31-year-old female employee, regained consciousness in the hospital the day after the fire. She later learned that she survived the catastrophe because she had hidden in the restroom. She used a wet towel to cover her mouth and nose, reducing smoke inhalation and saving her life. Now let's examine the case involving Zhu Beoguang, who caused 12 deaths and 1 injury. A year after the incident, the case officially went to trial. Zhu Beoguang was ultimately charged with 12 counts of murder, though he only admitted to unintentional manslaughter. The court determined that while Zhu Beoguang may not have intended to take everyone's lives, he had planned to end Lu Mai's life. Lawyers representing Zhu Beoguang argued that he did not intend to ignite the fire or harm anyone. Instead, they claimed he was simply trying to find his wife, albeit in an irrational manner. Although Zhu Beoguang's psychological evaluation deemed him mentally sound, it also described him as impulsive and self-centered. His defense lawyers argued that he never intended to evade responsibility. Ultimately, Zhu Baoguang admitted to deliberately setting the bank on fire. After 3 days of trial, the court unanimously sentenced him to life imprisonment. He appealed, claiming it was manslaughter, and his sentence was reduced to 20 years. The verdict sparked significant public outcry as 12 lives and 1 injury were exchanged for just 20 years in prison. However, the decision was final. Will Zhu Baoguang reform after his release? Those who let anger and impulsivity control their actions, committing unforgivable acts, often leave devastating consequences behind. It's a pity that their mistakes are never minor. Only time will tell if such individuals can truly change. And that concludes today's case. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to our channel. See you in the next video.